With the situation in Syria, this present Pope has had us all organize a prayer vigil once in the Vatican for peace in Syria. He's spoken several times and exhorted humanity to recognize how, with war, you do never fashion justice. You cannot seek to bring justice, an experience of justice to anybody through the instruments of war, because it creates more hostility and it makes people more, hostile towards one another, if not filled with even the spirit of vengeance. So for the Catholic Church, the commitment to peace is basic. I mean, there's no way a Catholic Church with Jesus as its, savior and leader, whose birth, was accompanied by a message of peace, peace to people of goodwill on this earth, how the Catholic Church can fail to appreciate, peace in the different situations in the world. So commitment to peace is in Syria. It's been prayed for. It's been supported through the local hierarchy whenever it is possible, and also through statements which are made by the Holy Father, and through small missions to Syria by, like the Pontifical Council of Cor Unum, to bring help to the refugees and all of them, to exhort them for peace.
I tell you, when we decided to flee, we were sitting at home and heard many explosions and machine guns shooting next to us. When we finally went out, we saw about 200 armed terrorists next to our house with all of these machine guns. We were really frightened. Then the terrorists remained there and became our neighbors. We were so afraid. All people were afraid, and the children too. We are so afraid of their weapons that we transferred to another village. Our village was called Turman, and the village we went to was Talbasia. All of us women and children stayed there for 4 months, far from our original village and homes. The terrorists stayed in our village while we were obliged to stay away. We could not re-enter our house. We left it as it was. We were especially afraid of violence against us women. That's why we were forced to flee.
We're following the dramatic situations of our communities in Syria, Iraq, as well the exodus of many thousands of Christians into Lebanon. We are taking care of those who mostly have been refugees, and they were forced to leave behind everything they did possess, and even they have been threatened and some of them kidnapped and abused, and we have to take care of them because of this horrible turmoil in Syria for the past 3 years. For ourselves, at the head of churches, we don't side with any party or regime. We don't support the government as such. We are well aware about this dramatic situation of the Syrian people because of the conflict getting worse day by day because of the fanaticism of some Islamic groups. They don't care about the human person. They kill, they kidnap, they abuse, they destroy churches, convents, monasteries, and houses just because they think they are defending the cause of Allah, the God they worship.
In Syria è un gran caos.
In Syria now, in the fourth year of war, is a terrible chaos.
Da settembre scorso più o meno.
It's a chaos that has been increasing since September 2013, when about 2,000 armed groups entered into action. These very active groups are out of control and even managed to damage the opposition. In Syria, the chaos worsens as it is unknown which groups are attacking which targets.
Dunque, lei in Siria non sa a chi fare, che gruppo si attacca, che gruppo.
Who attacked this church? Which group attacked that bishop?
L'invasione a Malula, chi lo fa?
Or which is the group that invaded Malula and took our sisters? We don't know. We don't know if it was the opposition, the so-called Free Army, or the other criminal groups with local, regional, or international interests.
Internazionali non sappiamo. Dunque, questo è il problema. The
confusion creates more and more chaos in Syria that both the people of Syria and the government have to face daily. This is all part of the problem that hurts a lot and frightens Syrian people. If the opposition would be more consistent, it would be united. They would confront with the government, but being so fragmentary does not represent an alternative.
Direi un miracolo questa Siria. Come la gente può andare avanti?
It is a miracle, this Syria, how our people keep going with this war that does not have a face, with these fighters that have no face. I don't know who is attacking me, if he is a Muslim Arab, a foreign Muslim, a European, or an American one.
Io ho fatto un elenco. 91 chiese che sono distrutte.
There is a list of 91 destroyed churches throughout Syria. There are different churches in Syria: Greek Catholic, Syriac Catholic, Syriac Orthodox, Maronite, Armenian, Chaldean, Latin, Protestant. In the meantime, the number of destroyed churches is growing. Malula is abandoned, destroyed, so it is in Haratsa, Daraya, Zabadan. The same happened in the so-called Christian Valley with 43 villages, in Homs, central city. Then in Reka, Hasake, and in many more villages, they have all been abandoned. My name is Ibrahim. I am from Syria, from Raqqa. From Raqqa. My name is Mohammed. My name is Raqqa. I am from Syria, Aleppo. The city of Aleppo has been heavily bombed every day for 3 years.
Aleppo, la città martire.
Aleppo is the martyr city in Syria.
Siamo arrivati a questo grado.
Unfortunately, we arrived at this level.
Soffre a causa della guerra.
Our people suffered too much for this war.
Mai non abbiamo pensato.
None of us would ever expect something like this.
E come sapete, Aleppo era una città aperta. Uno dei nostri
Aleppo was an open city.
poeti armeni.
One of our best Armenian poets said Aleppo is the city of the dreams.
Sogni.
But now it is only a destroyed city.
Una città dei sogni, è una città distrutta. Aleppo era una città dove si viveva bene.
It is a city where people used to live very well,
Una città dove musulmani
where Muslims and Christians were getting along well for centuries.
da secoli. Questa intesa fra di noi
There has always been a mutual understanding between us that gives an example to all the Arabic Muslim countries.
relazione finta. Ma era
In Aleppo,
una
the
relazione
relationship
di
between
amicizia,
Christians and Muslims
di
was not
apertura,
false relationship, but a friendly
perché
relationship
tutto
of
era
openness.
comune fra di noi. La nostra
Because we had
vita,
everything in
la
common,
lingua
our life,
araba,
our language, our
il
history,
nostro
and our
futuro,
future.
la nostra storia, tutto era per
Everything
noi
was in union
una
between Christians and
unione.
Muslims.
Come cristiani avevamo la nostra vita in piena libertà di religione.
We Christians had complete freedom of worship. Our churches and schools were open. There were many congregations. We used to make our religious processions in the streets. In Syria, Christians were not second-class citizens, but instead they had all the rights. There were Christians in the university and in all levels of the Syrian society and culture. We had our role of primary importance. Of course, not everything was excellent in Syria. Not everything was smooth. There were a lot of things that needed to be renewed, and we went on with the goodwill to do better. But what happened is that the revolution started. The rebels arrived, and the rebellion has become more and more armed over time.
Diventato qualcosa che era fuori
It has become
dalle
something
nostre
out of any
aspettative.
expectation.
Sono fanatici, non è una
Now we see that these rebels are
religione che vogliono
fanatics that do not want to
cambiare
change the government
il
in order to have a
governo
better
per avere
government,
un
to have a
governo
greater democracy
migliore,
or a major openness.
una più grande democrazia, una più apertura, ma al contrario quello che
On the
del
opposite,
quale
it
avevamo
has happened
paura,
something
questo
fearful, that a
questo
numerous
succede.
terrorists
Sono
from
arrivati
abroad
ribelli
came
da
in,
fuori,
foreign
stranieri,
militias of any kind.
e noi cristiani non
And
ci
now
sentiamo
Christians
più
are not
al
safe anymore.
sicuro.
I massacri di persone
What is the worst that I
che non
saw?
hanno niente da fare
The
con la
massacres. Massacres of people that had nothing to do with the war. The massacres of children and of women.
guerra. Anche quello che è brutto quando si impone ai
It
cristiani
is also horrible when the Christians are forbidden to pray the way they
non
believe,
poter pregare come vogliono, non
or they are not
restaurare
allowed
le
to
loro
repair the
chiese,
damaged churches,
quando si obbligano a pagare
or when they are obliged to pay the tax called jizya because they are Christians.
perché sono cristiani. E questo anche quando cristiani sono
It's even worse when the Christians are slaughtered because they do not renounce their faith in Jesus Christ and refuse to become Muslims.
diventano
This is a terrible thing. It happened in the village of Malula and in the village of Saddad.
cristiani.
We know some witnesses that assisted to the execution of 3 Christians that did not agree to become Muslims.
L'Islam.
This is really dreadful. I do not believe that most of the Muslims accept all of this, but this is what the fundamentalists have done.
Le grandi nazioni
If the great powers would like to end the war, they can stop it.
questa guerra e possono. Stanno lasciando passare tutto quello che si può, armi, soldi.
Anything that arrives to Syria is from abroad: weapons, money, false information, and lies.
A un certo punto io qualche volta vedo in questa guerra
I often see the evil in this war because the signs of evil are 3:
i segni del maligno
the money,
nel Vangelo
the lie,
sono tre.
and the blood.
Vediamo in questa guerra, in questa i soldi.
And in this war, we see the money, the lie, and the blood that is the death.
Dobbiamo pregare molto perché
We have to pray and pray a lot in order that the good might win and the evil will vanish.
sparisca.
But the evil has to vanish inside the mind and the hearts of those that waged this war, especially of those that promoted this war. Those that fight are only tools and are not the main responsibles. The main responsibles of this war are those who send their so-called rebels, that is, the mercenaries, the jihadists, and extremists. In fact, the majority of them are foreigners. Regarding the great history and culture of Syria, its antique civilization, many destructions occurred. The citadel and the souk of Aleppo, the shrine of Saint Simeon the Stylite, Palmyra, Croix de Chevalier, were heavily damaged. Many sites were used as battlefield and were destroyed.
Aleppo è la ciudad más culta de toda Siria.
Aleppo is the most cultivated city in all of Syria.
Nuestra sede de Aleppo, en nuestra iglesia, en nuestra catedral, en nuestro arzobispado,
Today you would see that in the street of our Syriac church, of our bishop house, there is our Syriac cathedral that is just on the fire line. It stands just between the Syrian army position and the rebels-held area. So, 50 meters in front of us, there are the rebels. If they invade us, they will kill all of us.
Pero estamos seguros de que Dios nos preste a la Santa Virgen María.
But we are sure that our Lord will help us. And we pray the Virgin Mary to protect us, to protect our cathedral, so that we don't have to leave our city. We don't have to leave Syria.
Ellos, lo que son poderosos en el mundo.
After all of this, about those of the world powers who made themselves judges of our situation,
Queremos que nadie se mete en nuestro país.
we think that nobody can come to our country and say to our governors that they have to leave, and then give the power to other people that they do not know anything about Syria.
Por eso digo al final, por favor, lo que tiene interés.
I tell those who have interests in our country, please stay away. We can resolve our problems.
No nos hace falta de que vengan de afuera para.
We don't need others to come from abroad and teach us ways of life and democracy. Our democracy is our people, and our people can decide our reasons.
Tenemos la razón o no.
Our people can decide who is going to govern us, who is going to be our president. Nobody has the right to come and tell us who must be governing us. I appeal to the Christians in the world, to the Catholics in the world, in Europe, in America. I tell you that the Christians here in Syria ask to stop feeding the terrorists, ask not to give them weapons or money. Also, we want and we ask that the terrorists free the 2 archbishops of Aleppo, Johanna Ibrahim and Paul Yazigi.
Da 3 anni che noi riceviamo qui dei profughi armeni.
For 3 years, we receive Syrian refugees, Armenian Catholics, Armenian Orthodox, also Armenian evangelicals. Now, lately, we had an emergency in the Syrian town of Kasab. Kasab is predominantly an Armenian town. All the inhabitants had to flee because the militias of al-Nusra were approaching the town. Then the terrorists took the houses, uprooted the cross from the churches, and raised the black flag of al-Nusra. The Islamic group of al-Nusra is affiliated to al-Qaeda. They want to reconstitute the caliphate of Syria and Iraq. They were allowed to enter Syria from Turkey, and their militias are killing, robbing, and destroying all they find on their way. We asked to the great powers to intervene in Turkey, to close its borders, and stop supporting the extremist militias that are formed by mercenaries that are not Syrian opponents, but they are coming from Afghan, Saudi Arabia, and other countries. There are just a few Syrians among them, but the majority are foreigners.
Nessuno si aspettava di quello che è capitato. E questo già è una
Nobody was expecting what happened in these last years in the Middle East.
La primavera araba, che potrebbe essere veramente una primavera.
The Arabic Spring might be a real spring if a democratic government could establish in every country. Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and other countries.
Ma ci sono anche altri paesi che non sono.
But a lot of countries are not democratic at all, like the Gulf countries, and now they are alarmed too.
All'interno di Siria, tutti sono, impegnati a aiutare.
In Syria, all the churches are committed to help the internal refugees, especially the Christians. In every parish, there is a center to help them.
Parrocchia c'è un centro per aiuto. In
my patriarchate in Damascus, I created a committee in 2011. Today, we help about 4,000 families.
Questo lavoro di aiutare, adesso abbiamo 4.000 famiglie. La Siria deve essere il cuore.
Syria must be in the heart of the world today for the future of the Middle East, because all of these new generations are in danger of falling into the fanaticism, the terrorism, the jihadism, and so on. Now the youth of the Middle East is in danger. The Middle East never was so fanatic. This extremism we see today, it did not exist in the Middle East.
Una globalità.
A global tradition of coexistence, of dialogue, of tolerance, of mutual acceptance is at risk with all of the danger in the Middle East today.
Tutti sforzi del mondo devono essere
All the possible efforts must be done to end this crisis.
nazionali, un disastro umano.
Otherwise, it is a complete national disaster, a human, spiritual disaster that is spreading its influence, a heavy influence, on Lebanon that is becoming unsafe, and an influence on the other Middle East countries.
We wish the war in Syria will finish as soon as possible, so the Syrians can come back to their country. We are working with the Vatican. The Vatican is working at in international level to stop this war. But you know, the devils are very strong in the history. But I think there is no hope for Islam, Muslim people, unless they accept each other, to reconcile between each other. That's why the future is for reconciliation and for coexistence. And that's why we have hope in Lebanon. The Maronite Church is doing well. We have a lot of hope. Our history is rich. We have saints, holy persons, and we are confident in God. In Lebanon, we suffered wars and persecutions, but we resisted and we succeed to create not the country of Lebanon, but the state of Lebanon in 920. And we had our independence, full independence in 1943. The country is built by 50% of Muslims, about 50% of Christians. We have our full rights, human rights, political rights, freedom of worship and freedom of conscience. In Lebanon, a Christian can become Muslim and Muslim can become Christian without any persecution. We have the day off on Sunday for all Lebanese, and we can build our churches freely. Evidently, problems are here. We have a war in Lebanon. A lot of Christians left the country, about 600,000, because of the difficulties of life and refugees from one country to another. But we succeed making reconciliation, and we are rebuilding the country. We have an agreement between each other, and this agreement is working. Evidently, we cannot say there are no problems. The coexistence has always problems. But it's a mission, it's an exciting situation. We do our best to have the gospel in this country and to preach whatever we like to preach.
This is an Orthodox Christian from Syria. She is here for 3 years. She affirms that she would like to go to Italy to thank the Pope because of what he has been doing for the Syrian people.
The Pope, because he has to know that when he talk or when he just show how much he give every Syrian the push to survive.
She says that the Pope is great, that he is wonderful. She thinks that probably the Pope does not know how much he gave to the Syrians, that he gave back to the Syrians their self-esteem.
L'amour propre.
During the Syrian crisis, the urgent situation among the refugees who come to Lebanon, and now we are talking about 1.5 million refugees inside of Lebanon, which means a third of the population as total population. As you know, Lebanon has almost 4,500,000, you have 1.5 million in the Lebanese territory. And among them, there is many situation of sanitary situation, poverty, illiterance, and many others problems. So this is a very problematic thing which face our church, Catholic Church in Lebanon, and also the government. So we need to collaborate with all these instances in order to serve these people, and especially to have a plan, a future plan to help, yes, but not to install them always on the Lebanese ground.
Most of the Syrian refugees are Muslims, about 90 to 95%. Most of them are women and children.
I love Syria.
We are from Syria, from Aleppo, an area called Fanasser. I have been here for 2 or 3 months. We are 11. They're doing some work there, but it is not for us. We have no place. Our things are hanging outside. Good that it is not raining these days. What can we do? We're obliged to live this way.
A questi poveri profughi che hanno lasciato la Siria per vivere sotto
all of those poor refugees who fled Syria and are living under the tents. Who can help them?
Materialmente, ma psicologicamente.
I mean not only practically, but also psychologically. These children saw the death, the bombings, the blood. Many lost their mother, their father, and their brother. How will they grow up? What kind of life will they live? How will they grow up? These are the people that left.
Ci dà un grande dolore che la gente vive.
We have motive of deep pain is that even if our people that did not flee to live under the tents, unfortunately they live here in their homes like refugees.
Vivono come profughi. Uno che non ha acqua, non ha luce.
One person who has no electricity, no telephone, no gas. What is he? Of course, he is staying in his house, but he is a refugee in his own home and he needs help. We think they are really poor. They became really poor.
Quello che ti fa mal al cuore di vedere tutte queste signore, questi signori.
It is heartbreaking the sight of all these gentlemen and of these ladies of good families that stay in queue and wait for a ration of bread, of sugar, of food, for some gas, for some help. They all stay in queue.
Ha cominciato una psicologia alla quale noi.
But by now, a mentality took shape, a mentality we are not used to, especially in Aleppo. It is the mentality we are not used to at all in Aleppo, the mentality that everybody is begging. They all became beggars.
È una situazione molto, ma molto critica.
It is a very, very critical situation. Notwithstanding the terrible situation here, we remain confident. We have a force to help the people, to help our faithful not to lose their hope. and this hope remains.
E per dire la verità, noi non abbiamo più speranza negli uomini.
To be sincere, our hope is not in men, but only in the Lord, God our Savior.
Terra Santa rimane Terra Santa nonostante tutti I problemi e ostacoli.
Holy Land remains Holy Land notwithstanding all the problems and the obstacles. It remains holy.
Pensiamo che I cristiani in Terra Santa sono
It is a hard situation. We think that Christians of Holy Land are an integral part of all its population. They are not a ghetto on a side. They are living like all the other inhabitants. That is, with fear, with daily living difficulties, with difficult access to the holy sites, but also with hope. According to us, and according to the Synod of the Oriental Churches, a Christian has to be and feel a citizen at 100%. We have to be proud of our identity, proud of our country that is so beautiful, and its holy land. If people from all the world come and joyfully visit at least once the Holy Land, we should consider ourselves privileged and honored to be living here all the time. We must be the alive witnesses of the events of the salvation. Regarding the Syrian crisis, we remind that in the Holy Land we still have our crisis, that violence did not stop, that the occupation did not end. This situation has been going on for 60 years, notwithstanding so many talks and so many meetings and dialogue and not dialogue. To be honest, up to now we did not see any solution. I heard that the international community is thinking of a political diplomatic solution for the Syrian crisis. I say, not so bad. Maybe it's a bit late that they started to think just now. They should have started to think of a political diplomatic solution before causing 150,000 victims among the Syrians. So, it's a bit late that only now, during these discussions, they start to see the spiritual dimension of all this area. If we speak of the Holy Land, there is the word holy. And this is something that concerns us, something that others do not know. As religious leaders, we are aware that by ourselves we cannot make peace. But without us, the politicians will never be able to make peace. It is necessary that they turn back to this eschatological dimension of the Holy Land. By this time, all the world is Holy Land, and all the world is in crisis. The majority of the Syrian refugees in Jordan are Muslim because Syria is a Muslim country, and only a few are Christians. Many other refugees went to Lebanon, some to Iraq or Turkey. All this situation has an influence on Christians here. We are Jordanian citizens, Syrian citizens, Iraqi citizens, and Lebanese citizens. Christians are the original inhabitants of these countries, and they have their passports, their identity. In this sense, we have our responsibilities as citizens. Nobody can say the opposite. But to be honest, there is a fear for the future. We cannot deny Syria was a peaceful country. We used to visit Syria, and we never had any problem. We could go anywhere. We were also very welcome. And it's a shame that now the country is in a terror, that it is a complete lack of security. But the Syrian crisis disturbed all this area, like in Lebanon, in Jordan. We hope all the international organizations and forces might help to re-establish the peace.
مدينة سورية كله دمار ما في سوريا كله دمار كله برميل متفجر كله.
In Syria, all cities were bombed. It is a complete destruction.
في اعتقال كثير عشان أشخاص في
all bombed by tanks, grenades, and airplane raids.
نساء
Children killed, old, young, so many massacres. Not only the Syrian army, but the foreign militias are killing. All those who want to destroy, to rob, to kill, they are coming to Syria. What these people do is not of normal people, but of people coming from the jungle. We have to encourage our people in order not to empty our cities, our villages of our Christian presence. We have to fulfill our mission in Middle East, co-living with the Muslims. We underline not all Muslims are extremists. There are extremists, but there are also good people. We should say that Jordan is a moderate country. We Christians are fine. We do our work, our celebrations. We have our schools, our institutions. So we are doing fine, notwithstanding that in the neighboring countries the situation is not good. But here the government, the king, and the people are moderate, not extremist. The Holy Father said that our mission is here, that we are in this land because there is a spiritual reason being Christians.
Ma dobbiamo veramente pensare che tanti pensano che il futuro dei cristiani
There are many people who think the future of Christians is in danger or in a critical state.
in stato critico.
Of course, because of some extremist movements and of their activities, because of terrorism that grows and causes the fear and the worries for the future. They want to save their families, their daughters and their sons.
I am Jordanian, pure Jordanian. Hard life, and we wear the holy salib, and we all our us conflicts, and but we are strong with Jesus, and we can manage our life with Jesus. Everything is good, and everything is easy, And we will not leave Jordan for anything beside us.
I think we probably need to draw attention to the other efforts by non-church groups, let us say even by governments, to probably help install peace in Syria. I mean, if the Holy Father says that the path to settling the situation and peace is not through war and conflict and all of that, then the talk right now, and it's going on even as we sit here, of countries in the West thinking that the way forward is to supply weapons, to let's say the rebels, while Russia supposed to bring weapons to Syria, the government in Syria. That's never going to lead us out of this crisis. I like to draw the attention whole world to what has already happened. I mean, there was a time that we thought we could settle political problems in Iraq by intervening militarily to change government. We can look at the fruit of that now. Iraq invaded by more radical groups whom the government can now deal with and get out. Iraq, where there's almost people die almost every day from bomb attacks and all of that. I mean, is that a better Iraq? Although it was under a dictator, could we not have negotiated politically from some kind of shared power or solution in that situation?
Our area is 20 kilometers next to Hasaki. We are Christians, and we had a lot of problems. We came to Iraq with my family, my wife and my mother, and together with people of my village and of another village. In Syria, we worked in the fields, cultivating cotton, grapes, and grains. Here they do not do this. Here you need another kind of work, a profession. We found some work in 2 schools, and this was a part-time job. We work a month and stay 2 months without working. Life is expensive, so we have to work. At least one in the family has to work. In this situation, I will not go back to Syria. We hope Syria will return as it was. Baghdada, called in Arabic Karkush, that is on the Nineveh plain, is the governorate of Mosul, is the most populous Christian town in the area of the ancient Church of Antioch that included countries that are today Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. Karakosh is representing a hope and a model for all of the Middle East. The situation in the Christian villages and towns like Karakosh is more stable than in Mosul, our province main city.
يعاني المسيحيون داخل الموصل من بعض المضايقات.
Christians in Mosul have no freedom. They undergo troubles, especially women and girls who cannot walk freely in the street if they don't wear a veil. Also, Christians have problems at work or in their business. There were 6,000 families in Mosul among the faithful of different churches, Syriacs, Chaldeans, Armenians, about 1 million people. Now there are 1/3 left or less. Some went to safest places in Iraq and most immigrated abroad. The Christian identity here is to love our land. It is our awareness of original inhabitants of this country. It is love for our work, love for peace and for safety.
طبعا الظروف الصعبة التي مرت على المسيحيين أنا في رأيي
The very bad situation that occurred to the Iraqi Christians, I think, according to my deep feeling, is that it resulted in increasing our faith. A Christian has to be courageous. He cannot be afraid if he has a real faith.
وأريد أن أؤكد بأن الذين حتى اللي خرجوا من العراق
Many of those who left Iraq to go abroad, also those among them that had no faith when they were in Iraq, once they immigrated to another country, they started to feel that the Christian faith was necessary for their life, and they cannot feel peaceful if they do not return to their faith. And their faith becomes real in joining the action of the church.
والمشاركة في الأعمال الكنسية.
My family is from Mosul here in Iraq, and we went to Syria because of the war and the difficult situation in Mosul for the Christians. We lived for 8 years in Hasaki, and we thank Syrians that gave us shelter. They helped and respected us in everything. They considered like if we were some of them, and Syria was to us a second country. We are sorry for what happened in Syria. We had to come back here because of the war. We came back to Nineveh, in Karakosh, thank God. The Christian tradition is deeply shaped in our society in these Christian villages and towns, so it is possible to trace Christian traditions in the social traditions and structures that are present up to now in our culture. Our availability to welcome people like all the refugees in the last decades are an effort of our faith, of our social tradition, and it influences the behavior of all of us.
Quello che stiamo facendo è quello di rafforzare la fede.
What we are doing is to reinforce the faith.
Qui la nostra terra. Noi abbiamo preso.
We say this is our land. We received our faith here, and we want to keep giving the faith to those who are here. For example, here the diocese started at St. Ephrem Institute of Christian Education for the Lay People. The institute offers courses of theology, of Bible studies, and human sciences. The situation of the Christians in Iraq is not good because they were persecuted and forced to move. Also, they were killed. So this touched the institutions and the churches. Many churches and priests in Baghdad and Mosul, Basra, Kirkuk were attacked. The Christian component should be well treated both by the Iraqi government and the international community because it is an important presence as they are those who started this country since its origins. I wish that in Iraq it will start a special interest for the Christian component, and also that some laws will be made in favor of Christians and of their rights and their freedoms. All laws come from the central government and do not focus on the needs of the Christians. The general Iraqi laws do not consider the peculiarities of the Christians' lifestyle. And consequently, there might also be forced changes in the demographic assets where Christians are up to now a majority. Here, the situation of the Christians is now influenced by the conditions of the Christian Syrians, and it is generally the same in the Middle East, because there is an idea to empty the Middle East of the Christians, and that's what we see happening in Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and Sudan.
I would like to say the first problem in the Middle East is not a Christian-Muslim problem now. It's Muslim-Muslim. In Egypt, it's between Muslims. In Libya, it's between Muslims. In Syria, it's between Muslims. In Iraq also. Evidently, the Christians are suffering because they are minorities over there, and they like to live in peace, in security, so they left. But I cannot, that's why the solution for the whole Middle East is a solution among Muslims all themselves. And we, as Christians, we have to work for that in the spirit of reconciliation. That's why we have a role and we have a place now, we have something to do. We have our mission to make rapprochement between all Muslim denominations. The Lebanese culture is made both by Muslim and Christian cultures. And we have a Christian culture coming back to Middle Ages or to earth Christianity, but we received a lot of influence from Islam, and we give the Islam our influences. So we have common cultures. We try to give our values of freedom, and I think the young generation like freedom all over the world, even in the Muslim countries. There is a lack of culture in the Western world about the Middle East and about the Islamic, and they have to make efforts in that field because the Islamic people are about 1,400,000,000. So you cannot avoid to deal with those people, and they exist. They have their languages, they have their religion. So I don't think the Western are doing good enough.
In the center of Kamishli, we were all Christians. In the suburbs, there were Muslim Arabs and Kurds. Of course, as Christians, we were a minority, but we were quite numerous. We lost a lot of young people. Many were shot, others beheaded. No one knows by whom. We were continuously menaced. There was no more security. I know about a slaughter at Marmarita. 15 girls and boys were killed. They were beheaded on the street in front of all the people. It was the day of feast of Our Lady. Then in other villages and towns, at Deir Zur, at Raqqa, the Christians were menaced so that they would convert to Islam. Then they were obliged to pay the jizya, a tax. The women have to wear the veil. The Christian men are obliged to go to the mosque or they will be killed. Also, in Aleppo, in Ras El Ain, it happened the same thing. One night in Ras El Ain, Christians had to flee all of a sudden. They left everything. They were threatened by Islamic groups only because they are Christians.
the conflict or the Syrian crisis is not to be compared to other Arabic countries, for instance, Egypt or Tunisia. The situation of Syria was much more complicated, but it's very unfortunate the Western politicians didn't want to understand this. And now they are telling us they had a wrong reading of the Syrian crisis. For us, we can say almost this wrong reading was fatal for our survival in our home countries in the Middle East, where our ancestors for millennia did live and did always witness to the Lord among the other communities. Therefore, we have to encourage our people to stand up for their faith, defending the truth, and being real witnesses to the Lord, to the gospel of peace and love among other communities. However, we as head of the churches, we are responsible to bring up this dramatic situation and tell the whole world, especially those who have the power on the international scene, to tell them that those who did suffer because of this crisis were not the governing people, but the innocent people, and mostly the Christian communities. They have been left for themselves without any defense.
C'è una grande presenza della Chiesa e c'è anche una voce comune della Chiesa.
During the Syrian crisis, the presence of the church has been very strong.
Hanno una visione della situazione.
Also, all the Oriental churches of different rites have a common voice. The patriarchs, the bishops, have a common view. That gives more spiritual force to our faithful.
Our Holy Father, in one of these things, talked about people who should not feed their children with dirty bread. And when he referred to that, he meant, if bread won from bribery and corruption is dirty, and so people should not feed there. Now, we may say the same thing to people who make wealth from warfare and from maintaining the instruments of warfare. You feeding your children not simply with dirty bread, but bloody bread, if you want, blood contaminated by the violence and the blood of so very many victims of warfare. And so, to all of this then, our desire for peace then, for us, should be accompanied by a certain self-opening to God's help, and the recognition also that in respect of true human values, we should give up certain instruments which perpetuate violence and warfare and embrace only those which make for human well-being and the advancement of our culture of peace.
It is important to urge and to work for a real peace and justice process among the Syrians themselves and among the international community, which has always interest and personal and economic interest from this crisis. I always ask this question: how could we find money to finance war, give weapons? And you know that the weapons are not very cheap, and we don't find money to feed people or to stop wars. This is a question to the conscience of the international community, because all of them are involved.
In the Holy Land, there are walls that were built 700 kilometers long. Those walls were at first walls in the heart of the man. That means mistrust, fear, hate, and ignorance. But in the Middle East, the Holy Land that I often refer to as the Church of the Calvary, the Church of Golgotha, of the suffering, is also the Church of resurrection, of the hope, of the joy, of the hope for everybody, of the peace for everybody.
La gente vuole ormai la pace.
People want peace. They cannot take anymore. They tell me, we are tired. When will all of this end? We entered a tunnel, and let's hope to see some light at the end. We ask for the seas of fire, and then we want a dialogue, because at the end of a war, nobody comes out as a winner. All of us are losers.
Abbiamo perso la Siria. Abbiamo perso Aleppo.
And we lost Syria, we lost Aleppo, and we lost our confidence. But then we'll start to rebuild. Of course, it is easy to rebuild the stones, but it is much more difficult to rebuild the person.
Perché c'è tanta gente che ha le mani ormai macchiate di sangue.
There are so many people that have blood-stained hands, the blood of their brothers, and that blood cry out to God.
Crediamo nel perdono. Crediamo che Dio può perdonare ogni peccato.
But we believe in the forgiveness. We believe that God can forgive any sin,
Dimenticare e rifare
and that it is possible to start all over again, that it is possible to forget and to rebuild this country more beautiful and more attractive than it ever was, and that it is possible that Syria will become again a country of peace and of fraternity among all religions and all the people.